Okay, so this video is continue on the tiers concept. I want to address some situations that might make the tiers a little more complicated, right? So the last video is just like king, jack, 10, something, something. You know, the tiers are pretty straightforward. You have a king, you have a tier 1 hand, you have a jack, you have tier 2, yada, yada. I want to address some situations where the tiers are not so straightforward. So, same situation. You're on the button, you got queen 10, cool. I'm going to go ahead and raise to $1.50. Okay, and let's say small blind folds, big blind calls, and we're off to the flop. Okay, so this is a good flop. You have a pair of queens, right? You have top pair, so that's a tier 1 hand, right? According to my methodology. Yeah, let's say, so the big blind checks, and yeah, I think this is good enough to bet here. I'm going to go ahead and fire off, bet at 250. Let's say the big blind calls. Okay, and we're off to the turn. Okay, so the turn brings another jack. Now, this is where it gets interesting. So initially, my hand was the best one-card hand you could have, right? You can't beat me with just one card. You could beat me with a queen if you have a better kicker. If you have king queen, okay, you got me beat, right? But a jack's not beating me, a 4's not beating me, ace high's not beating me, king high's not beating me, right? Now we got two jacks out there. So somebody who check called the flop, say with ace jack, now has trip jacks. Well, I'm beat now, right? So my hand is moved down to tier 2, right? Now it's not, the math isn't perfect because since there's two jacks on the board, there's only two jacks left in the deck, right? So whereas there's three queens, I mean, I have one of them, but there's 3 4s out there, So it's not quite as likely that they have a jack than, let's say there was an ace out here and I'd be worried about the ace. I'd be more worried about that because there'd be 3 of them, right, that my opponent could have. There's only 2 jacks my opponent can have, but for all intents and purposes, let's just kind of say my hand's tier 2 now, right? So big blind checks. I'm going to go ahead and check back here because I'm worried he check called the flop with second pair, right? He has ace jack, king jack, something like that. He just hit trips. He's going to try to check raise me here, right? He's going to maybe check, I bet, and then he goes gotcha and re-raises me. And then I'm kind of screwed, right? So I'm going to go ahead and check back here. And to the river we go. And it is a 7. So this doesn't change anything. My hand is still a tier 2 hand. And I've gained the information that, he checked, right? So let's say that the big blind checks the river. Okay, now maybe I feel comfortable. Maybe I was worried he had the jack, but I'm kind of figuring, okay, he would have bet. He didn't bet the turn. He would have bet the river, right, after I checked back. So I might still be good. Maybe I bet here, maybe I don't. But in any case, this is a situation where my hand's a tier 2, right? The whole point of this video is just what tier is my hand in. Okay, let's come up with a different scenario. I'm not going to move the chips around. I'm just going to show some cards and some situations. Oh yeah, one point of clarification. Let me get a low card out here. So, one point of clarification. If I have a hand like pocket 4s and the board is 10-7 deuce, this would be considered tier 3, right? So obviously I'm beating any 2s, but I am losing to any 7s. You should mentally think of this as more in line with the 2s than the 7s, right? Because you're losing to, somebody who has 7-3, you're losing to them, but you are beating somebody with ace deuce, right? So when you have a pocket pair, you're not touching anything on the board. Adjust your tier downward, right? So if you had pocket 9s here, it'd be more like the 7s. You have pocket 4s here, it's more like the 2s. If you have pocket jacks, it's closer to ace 10 than it is to like 2 pair. right? It's still really good. Pocket jacks here is great, but it's, 10-7 is like infinitely better than pocket jacks here, right? Yeah, so that's just one thing to think about. Just when you have pocket pair, you're part of the lower tier, not the higher tier. Okay, another situation that can arise. And let's see, I have something else. There we go. Let's say my hand is Jack 10 on this board. So on the flop, I'd have top pair, right? I have a tier 1 hand. Let's say the turn is a 6. Okay, yeah, still have top pair. There is a flush, a straight out there. 8-9 is a straight, but I'm not super worried about that. Now a 9 rolls off on the river. Okay, now my hand just got downgraded, right? Because anybody with an 8 has a straight. So a 10 is no longer the best singular card you can have. It's now tier 2. And actually kind of crappy tier 2 because there's 4 8s in the deck, right? There's not one of them sitting here. So yeah, this is tier 2. If you bet the flop, you keep firing on the turn, somebody calls, and then they either lead out on the river or they check raise you on the river. That's scary. That means they were kind of calling you with the straight draw, and they, maybe they had Jack 8 or something like that, 8-6 maybe, and they just hit the straight. You should be careful in that situation. One more situation. My daughter is walking around the house with her iPad. So on this board, all right, on this board, this is a bad example of a hand. There we go. Now, on this board where there's 4 to a flush out there, you might look at this and go, okay, I have a jack, so the only thing beating me is a queen, right? So I have a tier 2 hand. You do not have a tier 2 hand. In fact, you have nothing close to a tier 2 hand. There are 9 spades out there, and all of them have a flush, right? The 2 of spades has you beat, right? So think about this. So like a typical tier 1 hand, there's, like if there's an ace on the board, there's 3 aces out there, right? Okay, so a tier 2 hand is going to be like the next best 3 cards. When there's a flush out there, like 4 to a flush out there, the next best thing, so like a queen, is a tier 4 hand, right? Because there's 9 cards out there that can beat ace queen in this situation. So Jack 10 here is a tier 5 hand. Like this is pure garbage. If it gets to the river and there's 4 to a flush out there and you don't have the relevant suit, just check fold. You're not getting anything. You're not getting anything out of this, unless you're trying to bluff. But yeah, that's I've seen people make mistakes, or they're like, yeah, but I have top pair, or I have 2 pair, or trips, or whatever. It's like, yeah, your hand's garbage if you don't have a spade here, right? Okay, yeah. So that's just some more situations where your hand can kind of move up and down the tier list depending on what's on the board.